There's no denying that the Nintendo DS, Nintendo's bold departure from the Game Boy name and history, was a very beefy little fella in its day. The handheld would see a ton of epic sprawling RPGs, including fantastic entries in beloved series and cult hits that still don't get their due today. If you need a break from climbing to the top of the My Stop smoking coach with Alan Carr leaderboards, here are some RPGs on your DS that are PG. Pretty good. Note that we're keeping the entries to just one per franchise, just to make things more varied. Number 10, Suikoden Tear Cries. Suikoden Tear Cries is a bit underrated, as it doesn't seem to be remembered quite as often as the mainline games that amassed a cult following across the first two PlayStation consoles. Suikoden games are often marked by massive recruitable casts and a sense of scale and grandeur that's impressive even by RPG standards. Suikoden Tear Cries, a spin-off exploring one of the many worlds established by this franchise's lore, still has that in spades. However, the game does deviate from the main games in some interesting ways. For example, your characters can be equipped with multiple weapons, and certain features like army and duel battles are not to be found. If you have a very specific vision of what a Suikoden game should be, then you may struggle with this version. The game isn't even set in the same world that fans are familiar with. However, the refreshingly straightforward mechanics, likeable characters, and a moving story that once again has you obtaining the 108 stars of destiny makes this at least worth experiencing. If you don't mind its stark differences to the more well-known games, Suikoden Tear Cries is a game deserving of a second life, especially as it's almost entirely been forgotten about by most. Number 9, Radiant Historia. Set on a continent divided between two nations trapped in a bitter conflict, Radiant Historia, previously known as Radiant Krista, has players taking up the role of a soldier named Stock from the country of Alistel. Someone has to get everyone on the same page, and Radiant Historia's intense, complex narrative has Stock moving through timelines with a book known as the White Chronicle. Making crucial decisions in the course of the game with this book can open new paths in the narrative, and even in terms of gameplay itself. With the added weight of a story steeped in politics with a massive cast of names and faces, you can see why Radiant Historia fans love this dark, intense narrative. Beyond Radiant Historia's time travel component giving the high fantasy game enormous replay value with your choices leading to very different experiences and conclusions, it's also impressive to see the developers Atlas and Headlock keep all of those threads running in such a non-linear fashion. Radiant Historia also has some lovely visuals boasting striking character and monster designs and an appealing, fairly easy to figure out turn-based combat system that takes place on a 3x3 grid. Despite its massive story and its various possibilities, some of them very bleak, Radiant Historia is well worth seeking out. Number 8, Solitaire Robo Red the Hunter. If you've been hoping and praying for an action RPG with heavy steampunk aesthetics and anthropomorphic dogs and cats, well, that's very specific, but the developers of Tail Concerto have some amazing news for you. Hey, it's been at least 2 weeks since we mentioned Tail Concerto, some kind of record there, we think. Think of Solitaire Robo Red the Hunter as a spiritual successor to that banger. The character designs and even the general atmosphere of this world set across a series of islands in the sky will remind you of that profoundly underrated PS1 cult favourite that is also profoundly expensive. Hey, at least this one's a lot cheaper. Oh. Specific taste demands specific sacrifices, we guess, apparently including eating. Of course, Solitaire Robo also differs wildly from its predecessor, particularly in terms of the gameplay. While the former was a straight-up platformer, Red the Hunter has you gaining experience as you defeat your enemies, with the added ability to upgrade your mech as you progress through the game, because whoops, we forgot to mention that Solitaire Robo Red the Hunter also has those. There's also a ton of side quests, 83 in total, to keep you busy as you explore new areas and push the engaging main plot along. Despite its extremely charming graphics and cute characters, Solitaire Robo Red the Hunter is a deep game with addictive combat mechanics that allow Red to pull off some unique combos. Even if the bipedal animals make you reach for the nearest crucifix, you should still hunt this one down. Maybe at unofficial channels though? Number 7, Final Fantasy Tactics A2 Grimoire of the Rift. Good game, truly terrible name. Think of Final Fantasy Tactics A2 Grimoire of the Rift, and that's the last time I'll say it in total, as a loose sequel to Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. Though set in the same world and featuring some familiar elements, Grimoire of the Rift opts to tell its own story and builds on this universe in its own unique way. A magical book brings a young man named Luso to a world known as Ivalice, and now he must figure out how to get back home. Tactics may have a particular focus on its combat and party management, but the relatively lighter plot and ability to explore a new world in Grimoire of the Rift gives the game a nice added degree of depth. Tactics fans will be pleased to see the grid-style combat between parties that the series has become known for return here as well. It's all immersed in a world that fans will immediately be familiar with, which also means it's not too serious a learning curve for newcomers or anyone inexperienced with tactical RPGs. Fun fact, did you know that Vagrant Story is also set in the same world? Grimoire of the Rift doesn't quite have the same aesthetic hook as other tactics games, or does anything particularly out of the ordinary in its franchise, or even in the sub-series, but the bar has been set very, very high. Grimoire of the Rift is anything but grim. Number 6, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. Nearly 20 years after the 1990 release of the first Fire Emblem game on the Famicom, titled Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and The Blade of Light, the Leon DS Kennedy received a stellar remake in the form of Fire Emblem just Shadow Dragon. While in fact the second remake, Shadow Dragon, took full advantage of the DS's online capabilities in 2008 to allow for an online shop, but not in a horrible 2024 way, and even PvP. The dual screen of the DS was also used well, with the game giving new character stats alongside the turn-based tactical RPG action. Don't let the pretty straightforward layout mislead you though, this game can get pretty deep. Shadow Dragon introduces us to Prince Marth, who Smash Bros fans will no doubt remember as the character your nerdiest of friends always picked, and his quest to take back his home kingdom and rescue his sister from the forces of evil. They're always evil, these forces. Always. It's not the deepest basic premise, but Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon adds quite a bit of new story and characters to the adventure, including stuff cut from the first Japan-only remake from 1994. With over 50 characters across 20 classes, Shadow Dragon has more than enough to keep you busy, as you set about building and managing an army that will take back the world, one massive battle at a time. Number 5, Dragon Quest IX Sentinels of the Starry Skies. The Nintendo DS was the perfect destination for Dragon Quest IX Sentinels of the Starry Skies, the 9th entry, well, mainline entry in the iconic JRPG juggernaut. The game features exciting franchise firsts like a fully customizable player character as well as online play, which unfortunately hasn't been functional since 2014, just like my knees. Still, that doesn't detract from Dragon Quest IX being a role-playing game that can keep you busy across 40 plus hours for the main story alone, and that's being pretty conservative. Dragon Quest games love to become a full-time occupation, and this one is no different, with a diverse assortment of side quests and other fun bits and bobs that'll keep you locked in like your rent isn't due. And with artwork by the dearly departed Akira Toriyama, the whole game has a knack for wrapping you up in a warm blanket of the very best qualities of the best turn-based JRPGs. Dragon Quest IX begins simply enough, with your character leaving their angelic race of Celestrians to find the missing magical fruit of the realm. However, this fruit has dark consequences when dispersed throughout the mortal realm. You know what they say, a fig a day leads the dudes astray? The stakes rise fast in Sentinels of the Starry Skies, and it's almost impossible to not get sucked in. It's not been ported or remastered since it first came out, so, you know, let's get on that. Number 4, Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger may be a port of a 1995 SNES classic, but it's one that brought the game to Nintendo's new handheld console in a pretty damn good package. We're also just always going to talk about Chrono Trigger here if we get the chance. The anime cutscenes from the PS1 version may not be present in this version, but the additional sprawling dungeon more than makes up for that. It's also nice to have a version of Chrono Trigger that doesn't have agonizingly long load times, as was the case with the PS1 port. And with the DS version of the game being a good deal cheaper than the SNES original, this might be the way to go if you want a physical, straightforward copy of Chrono Trigger. At the end of the day, Chrono Trigger is an essential JRPG on any console. Players control a young boy named Chrono who soon finds himself on a time-travelling adventure with a princess named Mol after an invention designed by his friend Luca goes haywire at the town fair. The setup for the time travel is fantastic, making for a game that really creates a feeling of exploring whole new worlds. There's a spirit of adventure beneath the legendary designs by Akira Toriyama again, the various endings and even the multiple combat styles that no other JRPG has ever been able to recreate in such a way. Nothing is quite like Chrono Trigger, not even its still sorta underrated sequel, and that fact means that it's one of the best RPGs on any console lucky enough to boast this gem. Stadia never had Chrono Trigger, and that's why it died. No other reason, no other reason. Number 3, The World Ends With You.
This is nothing. Farewell. That'll do.
The World Ends With You lives up to its name almost immediately. As a teenager named Neku Sakuraba, you find yourself in modern-day Shibuya with no idea as to how you got there. All you know is the mission you're quickly given alongside a watch that shows you exactly how much time you have left. You also know that failing to complete the mission comes with the threat of complete erasure. This entire story would prove to be one of the more interesting narratives Square Enix developed at the time. Things get even crazier when you start getting into the combat system. Battle in The World Ends With You can be a little tricky at first. Both DS screens utilise essential elements of your combat, with your characters and enemies existing in different zones despite being in the same general place. You and your partner must share a health bar and can use collectible pins to increase the power of your attacks, which can also be done in cooperation with your partner, and yeah, this is a pretty complicated battle system to get a grip on. But once you do, and the game does give you plenty of space to get your bearings before things get significantly spicier, you'll find yourself incredibly impressed by the unique depth of The World Ends With You. It's a tougher RPG than you might be used to. Even so, the art style of The World Ends With You, drawing from street art and urban youth fashion influences, is just one of the ways it is unlike much else in the best way possible. People were begging for a sequel to this for years and years and years, and then nobody seemed to buy it. Guys, come on. Number 2, Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Really random way to start, but here's a very honest question. Is there anyone out there who's Team Ho-Oh over Lugia? I don't think I've ever met anyone. Let yourself be heard down below. Remaking 2 fan favourite Pokemon games, Gold and Silver, wasn't enough for the developers at Game Freak. and Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which feature numerous quality of life improvements, including the addition of an in-game clock system, upgraded 3D graphics, and the ability to have your first slotted Pokemon follow you around on the overworld screen. At the time, players had only seen this feature in a very limited capacity in yellow, but with all the changes big and small for Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the essential components of why these games have captivated players for decades can be found pretty quickly. You're travelling two big, beautiful, bright regions in Johto and Kanto, and you're capturing an incredible range of pocket monsters, including the legendary Pokemon Sudowoodo. What? He's a legend, he's literally the best. Name a better Pokemon. You can't. Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver made timeless classics even more timeless with plenty of meaningful updates, creating one of the best examples of a remake done to perfection, improving upon the original in every viable way. It's easier said than done, we guess. Number 1, Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. There's a lot of cleverness to be found throughout Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. From a cute narrative that sees Mario and Luigi trapped inside Bowser's insides while Bowser runs amok on the surface world, to graphics and dialogue that emphasize a bizarre, adorable sense of humor and style, Bowser's Inside Story is a game that sneaks up on you. You get to experience one of the most unique attempts at a Mario game we've ever seen. Yoshi's Time Crisis, with Bowser's Inside Story making good use of the dual screen, putting Bowser on the top screen and Mario and Luigi on the bottom, with the plumbing studs getting inhaled into the Big Mad Turtle. It's basically like that weird episode in every animated show ever made where the main characters are shrunk down and go into someone else's body. Anyway, moving back and forth between the two screens soon becomes seamless and really sells the tech without ever making it feel like a cheap gimmick. It's probably up there as some of the best uses of the titular DS that we can think of. You also get the reward of Bowser's Inside Story being one of the funniest Mario games ever made. Seriously, with a game that balances inventive gameplay with what is essentially two separate adventures that are expertly woven together in a variety of clever ways, it's a pretty neat bonus that Bowser's Inside Story also has time to be deeply, hysterically funny. If Mario and Luigi Brothership is even half as fun as this, the best DS RPG of all time, it's gonna do alright. And that was our video looking at the best disruptors of all time. I've been Jimmy for Cultured Vultures, and can we pretend that sentinels in the starry sky are like shooting stars? I could really use a fig right now. Fig right now. Fig right now. Thank you for watching.